Joining me right now, GOP political strategist Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Chad. Good morning. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing great. Before we get to an article that you wrote last week about 5 October surprises that could shake up the presidential race, I had Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick on earlier. And as you know, he was just named Texas, the Trump Texas chairman for the Trump campaign. Dan Patrick, very conservative. Tea Party, very conservative lawmaker here in Texas. Donald Trump is not seen by a lot of people as conservative as Dan Patrick. What does it say when Dan Patrick jumps on board? What's the message that maybe Trump is trying to send out by naming someone like Dan Patrick the state chairman?
Well, keep in mind, Patrick has supported Trump really from the time that he clinched the nomination after Indiana. He was very quick to adopt, to announce his support. Look, there's variations here on how our different statewide elected officials are reacting to Trump as our nominee. There's no question about that, right? You have Cruz on one end of the spectrum, refusing to endorse and making clear he doesn't think Trump's conservative. And then you have really Patrick on the other end, really all in. So Sid Miller, our agriculture commissioner. I would say Governor Abbott is probably, closer to Patrick, but not all the way there. He's endorsed him and is supportive, but hasn't been out front all that much. I think in Patrick, he found, Trump is finding someone who's obviously has a statewide organization, who has an ability to raise money, who understands, the issues that matter here, who has grassroots strength in terms of an organization. And so I don't know if it's, I don't really know what it's going to actually mean because, even though Hillary has opened a couple offices, she's not spending any money on television in Texas. And so if she doesn't do that, she's not serious about competing here. And I don't think she will spend real money here. So I think it's a very positive thing for Trump to get someone like our lieutenant governor, who is well respected, who's in a powerful position, who is undoubtedly a conservative, to lead his organization in our state. I just don't know what it's going to mean in a sort of day-to-day manner since, Trump's not going to be campaigning here. He's been in Texas several times to raise money. He has had one or two rallies, but he's focused on battleground states, and that's where he should be focused.
All right, let's talk about your article. You wrote an article for Observer.com. The title of it, we sent it out via Twitter. Folks, you can see it that way, and we'll link to it in into the podcast. But 5 October surprises that could shake up the race for the White House. In this, the number 2 terrorist attack. What we saw this weekend looks like it could play out to be a terrorist attack, whether it's homegrown, international plot, whatever it may be. Is that the type of attack that could have an impact on this race?
I think so. Obviously, you can measure these terrorist attacks by first whether they occur on U.S. soil or not, because obviously anything on U.S. soil is going to have more of a psychological impact on the public. But second, obviously, by the damage that's done. And I haven't followed it really closely, but I believe we haven't had any loss of life, or if we had some very, very, very limited, thankfully, for these 3 or maybe now 4 incidents that have happened over the weekend. I guess 3 in New York, New Jersey, and then the stabbing in Minnesota, where I think there may have been some injured or some killed. Yeah. But these were not mass terrorism events where you saw dozens or even hundreds of people killed. And so, but look, I do think obviously this is going to recast the race, in the direction of national security and terrorism, because Hillary's not really proposing anything new, anything different from what Obama and Biden, and in fact, Xi have been doing for the last 8 years. I think if you're worried about terrorism, I'm not sure you necessarily think Hillary's going to do anything differently. So I think to some extent, from a political standpoint, if we just coldly analyze this, this kind of uncertainty and obviously global affairs and national security and terrorism would perhaps redound to Trump's benefit. Now, obviously, he has to show himself to be credible, to be serious. He obviously has talked about going after ISIS directly in very, very, very blunt terms. But he's going to have to pass a credibility threshold, and I think his opportunity to do that is in the first debate 1 week from tonight.
Well, and it's something that the polls have been interesting on this because they either show a close race or 1 or 2 points ahead for either Trump or Hillary on the issue of national security and terrorism, where people are sort of split on who would do a better job. Is that where the debate can really show Trump as being a completely different direction than Hillary? Is that where he gains the momentum on that?
Yeah, and really, I think again, this sort of comes down to does he show himself to be a credible choice? Hillary has negatives, right? Negatives related to honesty, negatives related to ethics, negatives related to not offering enough change in terms of the direction of the country. But she doesn't really have the negative of not potentially being qualified or being a credible president of the United States. And I think Trump has to pass that credibility threshold, and that's what the first debate is about. Trump does not have to show he knows as much as her, or he's as strong a debater, or he's as well-polished, et cetera. He just has to show he's credible. It's very similar to the challenge that Ronald Reagan faced in 1980 against Jimmy Carter. Now, of course, he's been a two-term governor of California, but he was not taken seriously by a lot of people around that time. And he showed himself to be credible in that first and particularly in the second debate in 1980. And that went a long way to clinching that race for him. So, in moments like this, I just watched Hillary Clinton's press conference. She's very good. I mean, she already talked to the governor of Minnesota, the mayor of New York. She understands how to respond to these kinds of incidents. It's going to be interesting to see how Trump responds. A tweet is not enough. He's got to demonstrate he understands the terrorist threat. He has specific plans to go after it, and that he's going to do something that's fundamentally different from what Obama and Clinton and Biden have done over the last 8 years. And he's going to have to do that on the biggest stage, perhaps in American history, with 80 or 100 million people tuned in 1 week from tonight.
One of your other October or potential October surprises that you list, the number one, WikiLeaks. What is it about WikiLeaks that you think could be the big October or November surprise here?
Yeah, their founder, Julian Assange, has been hinting at this for weeks and weeks and weeks. But, the question, so far all they've put out basically are hacked emails from the Democratic National Committee. They did a first tranche around the time of the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, which led to their chairwoman resigning on the eve of the convention. They did another tranche, I guess, about a week ago that's still kind of filtering out through the system and included some details that led to some pay-for-play allegations regarding ambassadorships and some other things that have been embarrassing. But to me, those aren't game changers. The game changer is, does he have or does WikiLeaks have any of her deleted emails? The controversial Benghazi, anything to do with the Clinton Foundation, anything that was clearly work-related, anything that was classified, anything along those lines, anything that can show perhaps there was a quid pro quo between a Clinton Foundation donor giving money to the foundation and then getting something specific in return. That's the kind of game changer I think we could have that is entirely plausible from an organization like WikiLeaks, and that's kind of what they've been hinting at. If I were them and I wanted to, kind of have the greatest, maximum impact, I would probably, release something along those lines before the first debate, maybe a couple days before the first debate, to ensure it's part of that first debate, which may have the largest audience of all three.
If something like that you just mentioned, if that comes out, who does that make stay home? I mean, that's not going to convince any Democrats to go vote for Trump, right? Is that more of a people just give up on Hillary and stay home impact? What kind of impact does that have?
Yeah, I think that's one possibility, and I actually think turnout is something a lot of analysts are really focusing on right now. You would think because interest is high that turnout would be high, but it may not be. It may not end up being that way because this has been such a negative race. Both candidates are upside down, viewed more negatively than positively, and it's likely to get even more negative over time. And so, that you may not have record turnout, or if you do, it may not be what people might think would happen. So, yes, on the one hand, you could have Hillary supporters or sort of traditional Democratic voters in general elections stay home if they're not enthusiastic about Hillary. The other thing that's more important, though, Chad, is in that circumstance where WikiLeaks releases something that's truly damaging or embarrassing to Hillary, is that then she's going to be on defense on that for a period of days or a period of weeks. And what we've seen in this race, this is the single easiest way to understand what's happening in this presidential race. Whoever's in the news loses support. And that's because both candidates are viewed so negatively, so much more negatively than positively. So for the last 2 weeks, Hillary's been in the news for her health, for the FBI notes from the that were released around Labor Day, Colin Powell's emails, et cetera. She's been in the news for 3 weeks, and that's a big part of why Trump has really almost tied this race nationally. And so if that happened here, she'd be in the news again. Trump would not be in the news because I think, in the polls.
Visiting with Matt Mackowiak. Matt, running out of time, but we'll encourage people to go online at observer.com, and we'll link to it in the in the podcast today to your story. But some great thoughts there. Appreciate your time today. Tell folks that they can find on your website, mustreadtexas.com.
Yeah, just real quick, I've got a new column from this morning in the Austin American Statesman on the opportunity regarding school choice the Texas legislature concedes with the upcoming legislative session. You can find that, all the top news, opinion, and blog items from around the state at mustreadtexas.com.
All right. As always, Matt, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Have a great week, Chad. Take care.
You too. That's Matt Mackowiak. Follow him on Twitter at Matt Mackowiak.